Hello everybody and welcome to the first episode of my solo part of the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Deltarune and there's going to be some more information about the solo stuff later on in the video, but I want to get right into the review. So there's going to be a spoiler and a non-spoiler version of this, and there'll be plenty of warning in between. The non-spoiler is just kind of a quick kind of opening. There's not much to say without spoiling, so yeah. As far as the non-spoiler, so if it's a pretty good game, especially for the low price of free. If you played Undertale at all, you'll probably like this game. It's on the same wavelength. If you don't know what Undertale is, or you just don't care for it, this is basically just another story-driven game that, if you have free time, you might as well try it because it can't hurt. It's free, so. Warning, incoming spoiler alert. If you have not played the game or do not want to know anything about the game, please use the link provided to skip further into the video. Thank you and enjoy. With that, I'm going to move on to the meat of the video, the spoiler version. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the characters, because they're kind of the main part of Deltarune, I feel like. So Susie, I'm going to start off with first, because she's kind of my least favorite main character, that is. She kind of sticks to this stereotype of like, oh, I'm this evil person at the start, but I'm going to become a friend later. And I really hate that stereotype, but it can be done well. But in Deltarune, I feel like she is that way. You know it right from the start, and it just kind of goes through and happens. I like characters more like Rousey, something like that, because he kind of starts off with this like nice cuddly person, but you kind of get this weird vibe from him at the start. At least I did. Especially the way he kind of slams his door and he kind of says to you like, "Oh, there's no going back." He's got this weird mission. I kind of had this odd feeling that, well, what if he's the kind of main villain? So at least there was something else there to keep me interested. That kind of quickly faded away as I went through the game and learned more about Rousey. But Lancer, however, I think makes Susie a better character because their interactions kind of keep that interesting. So I feel like Lancer's point is to kind of make Susie more interesting. On a whole, I think the characters are done okay. Not as good as I was expecting, but they're not bad. However, saying this, most of the characters are kind of passive. Most of them seem to be more of like joke characters. They're kind of around to either make a joke and then leave, or so forth. I'll get into that a little more when I talk about the enemies. But as for the main characters, we can see an example of this when like Susie and Lancer team up, and they're hatching this plan, and you even make this robot for him, kind of, or you make this plan for a robot for him, and then all of a sudden they didn't actually do anything, and the whole thing kind of turns into a joke. Which is okay if it happens. I mean, it happened in Undertale. It's still a pretty good game. But it almost happens too much in this game, and I feel like that can be kind of a problem. Because of this, I think I felt that the main character was less of a main character and more of just like somebody to fill a role. Because as I went through the game, I felt more like I was watching something than actually playing something. Which wasn't necessarily bad, but I was expecting a little more from the game. But enough about grabbing at the characters. Let's move on to the music. So compared to Undertale, it's very different actually. Undertale had this music that almost was its own game element. For example, in the Genocide run, it was just completely somewhat removed to show that like there was nothing there. So it kind of had its own like story element. Uh, with Deltarune, it seems a little more passive. It's just kind of there, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that the music kind of does its job by being there in the scenes. Just not as bold as I was expecting it to be, I guess. Speaking of things being worked into gameplay, let's talk about gameplay itself. So, I was somewhat disappointed that Deltarune still kind of falls into this pattern of like, if you do blank, you'll just kind of get through the fight. Most of the enemies aren't very or there's not a big variety, so the I guess puzzle to get through them, whether you do the combat or the acting, it kind of becomes kind of becomes a pattern. Uh, so that kind of disappointed me. However, I was very intrigued by the new systems. I liked how that you're given multiple kind of people to do stuff with, as well as a new kind of option, which is the defense option, and then the whole spells and stuff. I like seeing this because it means that Toby is trying to do something or trying to change some things, try to bring variety. Too often you see that games these days find something that works and then just kind of keep doing it until everyone absolutely hates it. So I was glad to see there's kind of a new breath of life breathed into Toby's games. I did mention the enemies slightly there. Again, they're not as varied as they were in Undertale, and I feel like this is part due to the fact that, I mean, it was just one chapter. However, with the length of the game, I kind of expected a little more variety within the enemies. A lot of the characters, especially the kind of bosses, were kind of set up as joke characters, which again, I said previously, it works, but I feel like it's done a little too much. Lancer's a good example of this. I think I used the example before where kind of Lancer and Susie, they build that robot, but it doesn't really do much. I would have liked to seen more interesting boss fights like we saw in Undertale. I mean, another example is the King's Puzzle Maker. He's set up as this big crazy guy, but then he just kind of ends up being this really easy boss fight, and of a boss that you've already faced before, slightly varied. So that kind of bothered me. So those are the main points that I wanted to touch on that I saw within the game. And I know I've bashed on the game a lot, but I still actually really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it. Uh, and the reason for that being is Toby has a really good sense of characters. He knows how to take his characters and make them interact to make the story seem interesting. So even if nothing is going on, it still is interesting and fun and cool. The environments he builds are always very amazing. That being said, I would not recommend this game to somebody who likes action-packed games or shooters, or even people who like strategy games, because of the pattern that you kind of fall in with these fights. But for those who really like story-driven games, this is a perfect game, and it shares that kind of quality with Undertale. Toby also does a really good job at small, fine details. There's a lot of little things packed in this game that are just kind of interesting. I really enjoyed the town scene at the end of the game where you kind of gotta see all the kind of old characters you recognize, and it was really interesting to see how they've like differed, which I'm assuming is because it's like an alternate universe, but I don't want to go into like too many theories about that. And of course, this is only chapter one. I'm excited to see what happens next in chapter two, especially with that really weird ending. So yeah, hey, you guys made it to the end of the video. And because of that, I am fully open to any criticism and thoughts you guys have about my opinions of the game. I'm also okay if you guys want to like post some theories to what you guys are thinking about that, what's going on in this first chapter and stuff. I'd also love to hear that because I've seen a few of those floating around, find them interesting, and I want to see more. Besides that, for my solo stuff, I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna be doing like specifically. I'm gonna be doing a lot of gameplay. I'm gonna be doing reviews. I'd like to do crossovers and stuff with Sam or Kyle because I think that'd be cool. But again, that's all up in the air for now. Nothing's really set in stone. Uh, I don't really have a schedule planned, but hopefully that can come in the future as soon as we get kind of comfortable with this solo channel stuff. But yeah, thank you for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Boy!